Crime is something that impacts every community, from here in Washington, D.C. to the Midwest to rural Alaska. Trying to reduce shootings and violence is a problem that has vexed lawmakers for years. But new research shows that the tough on crime mantra might not be the solution voters are looking for.
There's no question that the fear of crime is real.
From political ads to local news,
6 shootings within just 4 hours.
Americans hear a lot about crime.
You're looking at actual violent crimes caught on camera.
But despite that, nationally, violent crime rates have been going down for decades. There are some exceptions. FBI crime data shows a spike in homicides and aggravated assaults from 2019 to 2020. But overall, violent crime has been trending down since the early 1990s. However, that hasn't stopped Americans from worrying. Over the last 50 years, at least 1 in 4 Americans said they feel like crime is worse than the year before.
The public and the politicians kind of feed off of each other and reinforce each other.
Putting criminals before victims, and Riley stands with them.
In 2022, Republican candidates focused a lot on crime. In fact, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said her party lost control of the House in part because New York Democrats didn't effectively address voters' concerns on the issue.
We believe that every American deserves to live in a safe community where they and their families can thrive.
Crime and how politicians talk about it can be crucial in local elections, too. Take this year's Chicago mayoral race. 44% of voters in the Windy City said crime and public safety was a top concern.
My biggest issue is crime in Chicago.
I'm looking for a new approach to policing.
The two runoff candidates, Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallis, proposed different solutions. Vallis wanted to put more money into the Chicago Police Department. Johnson campaigned on tackling the root causes of crime, like improving mental health resources and creating new youth employment opportunities. Ultimately, voters backed Johnson, and that election confirms what criminology professor Kevin Wozniak uncovered in his own research.
I think a lot of scholars, a lot of journalists, and a lot of politicians really underestimated that public appetite for investing into communities so that communities themselves could help fight and prevent crime.
Wozniak says much of the existing research is too simplistic. Asking questions like, do you agree with the death penalty or do you support defunding the police, are too broad. So he wanted to find out how Americans reacted when given a more complex choice. So if you were writing the crime prevention budget, would you give more money to police and prisons, or would you invest in community institutions?
A majority of Americans, both white and Black Americans, tend to either prefer a balanced budget, where they would kind of roughly split their hypothetical money between criminal justice institutions and community-based institutions, or significant chunks of the public actually would invest most or all of their money into community institutions.
Congress has struggled to find compromise on crime policy. But in 2018, then President Trump signed the First Step Act. The law changed federal sentencing guidelines and mandated improvements in federal prisons. Senators Dick Durbin and Chuck Grassley pushed that bill through and promised more to come. But 5 years later, their follow-up bills haven't gotten any traction.
I, Brandon Johnson.
Wozniak thinks Johnson's win in Chicago could show other major cities that a holistic approach to reducing crime is something voters support.
I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to help move the overall national conversation in that direction, which I think would be a very positive and evidence-based thing to do.
Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News, Washington.